Hello, welcome to part 3 of a video series for adding a new component in Octant. As a quick recap, the first video talked about how to generate the backend machinery to have this JSON file, and then part 2 was a video showing how to implement this as an Angular component in Octant, and now we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping and add this in Storybook. For those not familiar with what Storybook is, it's a utility that shows all of our components, so plugin authors and other developers can have a reference to know what components are available and what they can do. So the best way to get started is just to run the Storybook, npm run Storybook, and this will load up a bunch of stuff. And depending on your computer, this may or may not take a while. Uh, but I think generally the first time running this does take some time. Cool. So now we get this storybook page. This is also available if you do a pull request. It shows this build on Netlify. So we see a bunch of these components here, and we can somewhat mirror this by going into web source stories, and we'll see a bunch of MDX files that are going to mirror this list of components shown here. So we're going to create a new entry for our timeline component. So let's do timeline.stories.mdx. And it'll reload and doesn't like the fact that we have a new file that's empty, but we'll take care of that in a second. So this is an interesting point where I would say for someone who's getting started, just find an existing stories file and just copy it over. There's probably a world here where templating is better, but this just avoids the whole scenario of trying to make sure all the tags and uh, any syntactical errors are caught. So we will just copy and paste an existing table component, and we'll get rid of this second props here since we're only going to show just one table component here. And so, oh, did the table, okay, so now we get rid of the table component, and I will optimize this a little bit. And so this will stay in this state for a little while until we get our timeline component online. So I'll maximize this for now, and let's get started with some of our changes. So this is no longer a data grid component, it's going to be a timeline component. And then we'll do a timeline component here. And we'll just keep going through this timeline docs. And so this is a code snippet available for just at a glance on how some of the methods are done. We did this in video 2, where we had a sample plugin that just added the timeline just to show it could work on screen. So we will also just paste that here. And I think this is good enough. This has a timeline step current and processing, so that'll be our goal for this storybook. This is not a text view, it's going to be a timeline view. And this is going to be a timeline title. Now, I believe here, yeah, so this timeline view corresponds to the metadata found in here, right? So this is the actual title component. I don't think we use this anywhere right now, but we could see like if we wanted to have a timeline with a big title overhead, it would probably exist above this line, right? We'd have another header or title tag above here that would show our title. And that could be also implemented in the future or ultimately as part of this PR when it's pushed. But for now, we will keep going. We have this timeline component. Oh, component. Then we'll also update this to timeline component and continue fixing this up. Timeline docs and here. We see here this is going to be a metadata of type timeline, so we will update that as well. And this is config specific to a table, so I think we can get rid of most of this stuff here, and our config should really consist of steps. And that can be filled in a moment, but then we can also finally add this timeline component here and add a timeline component here as well. So let's see how far this gets us if we were to reload our storybook. So there it is, timeline, and then now we have a timeline component. It's empty because we have no steps, and that's okay. So at least now we have this entry set up for us. So the next thing we got to do is to add some steps. So let's do, and we can use this as a reference, right? We want to add a step for current and processing. So what we can do is add state. Then we can do current. Then we could do something like header, current header, title, step 1, description. This is a current step. And then we could go ahead and add a second one, state processing header. Step 2, description. This is a processing step. All right. Here, let's see. Now it's loading. And let's see what it wants us to do. Okay, so we had to reload that, but we can see here we have our step 1 and step 2. We see a warning here, component not found in compodoc.json. So let's take a look at that. psconfig.compodoc.json.web. And let me expand this out a little bit. So I think what we just want to do is go find presentation, and this might or might not be in alphabetical order. It doesn't look like so. In which case, I guess we'll just add this here. Just add a bit of drop down. We'll do timeline, timeline.component, and then we'll do it once more for the spec file. Timeline.spec. And might take a reload for this to go away. Yeah, so this looks like it'll want a reload where this warning goes away. So we'll try it and see if adding this reloading with a new tsconfig will do it, since it doesn't look like the watcher's updating after we updated it. Cool, so let's look at timeline. All right, so this looks pretty good. We've got some miscellaneous errors. Looks benign, so we'll leave that alone. But now we see we have this timeline component implemented. We could also just update this description. So we go into docs, right? This is where our description. This is obviously not a table component, but we can update this as necessary. So we can do some timeline component. A timeline component is used to show the user's current state in a series of steps. Cool. Then we can have additional data about or documentation about when used in some example. In this case, I don't think we need that at all. So we'll just leave that alone. And now we can also take a look at this canvas, and we go into knobs. We can see that we have step 1 and step 2. So for usage, we could even do something interesting like copy one of these additional steps here, and we paste it in, we can actually add an additional step to show how this works. So that is roughly how a storybook works, and we can look into other components as an example. Like, for example, a table component has multiple usages, so we could certainly just keep going with this canvas toolbar and continue to add more of these args table to show different usage patterns if we want to show like nested components and so forth. So that's about it. The remaining piece of this is likely to implement an action, which will likely either be in a different video in the future or part of a separate PR. But this is in a nutshell how to add a component. So hope this helps and have a nice day.